I read 24 books in the month of January. My reading goal for this year is 100 books, and I am already well on my way to meeting that goal. Howdy hey cowpokes, it's Conway Titty, and we're back doing some more book talk, bookish, Bookstagram type content. At the end of every month, I want to share all the books that I've read during that month. And first month up, obviously, is January. And in January, I read 24 books, which was crazy, as well as writing an entire book. I had so much inspiration while I was reading as well. So it really kind of fell hand in hand of like, when I wasn't writing, I was reading or listening to an audiobook. I was doing some sort of consumption, really taking notes of like things that I liked in books, things that I didn't like in books, words that I thought were super overused. There's a lot to it. The very first book that I read this year, as well as the very first book that I also read last year, is The Great Morality by John Kelly. It is all about the bubonic plague / the Black Death, the lengthy period that it was taking over basically the world and ravaging across tons of countries. It's a very good read. It's a very knowledgeable read. Lots of research went into this book. It's a great source if you want to know more about the Black Plague. And also kind of staying on the same topic of the Black Plague, next book that I read after that was A Journal of the Plague Year. That was another really good read. It was very much written as a fiction book, but it felt like it was someone's actual diary during that time. So if you like that, then that's right up your alley. Honestly, my books already this year have been all over the place when it comes to romance, dark romance, fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction, young adult. I don't really have a genre that I just constantly read. It is literally all over the place. Horror as well. I literally forgot to throw in horror. But these were books that I read. I think I read them 2 years ago, the entire series, but it was a series that I read my whole childhood. I really enjoy these books. They are the Children of the Lamps series by P.B. Kerr. So I read the first 3 again, and then I was like, okay, I want to move on to some more books because I've read them so many times. But those are really good young adult kind of book about some kids who get magical powers and are genies, and they're just super nostalgic to me, and I really enjoy reading them. After that, I really kind of dove into some books that I was seeing that were really popular on Book Talk and Bookstagram, especially when they are like big publisher releases that everyone's like hyping up. Unfortunately, I absolutely hated this book. It was Her Night at the Museum. I could not even finish it, so I DNF'd it. It was horrendous. The story premise is like a great creative aspect, but it was so badly written and just really fell flat for me. And I really hate that this was a submission book. Some big publishers have to where tons of indie authors can submit their manuscripts, and out of thousands of manuscripts, that is the one that a big publisher chose out of all of them. It was just really bad and totally overhyped, and absolutely hated it. 2 stars. Another series that I decided to dive into, I read this book at the very end of the year, so I think I counted it for January's read, but it is another kind of young adult little series. The second book just came out, and I also read that at the end of January, but it is the Dungeons and Drama by Christy Boyce. I thoroughly loved it. I thought it was super cute and definitely something I would have read younger as well, but I really enjoy young adult books because they just have that kind of like magic feeling to it, and you can kind of get a little innocent and get lost in the story and not think too hard about it and really just enjoy things that are super cheesy or super cute, and it just kind of reminds you of like younger days, I guess, as well, which is also weird to say, but thoroughly enjoyed that. And then the second book that also just came out, also by Christy Boyce in the series, is the Dating and Dungeons book. I liked the first book better than I liked the second book. However, the like grandma in this book was absolutely hilarious and she really made the book, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 star rating. And I think I gave the other one like a 4.5 star rating. Next on this list is another kind of plague book. I really leaned into the plague kind of atmosphere and did a lot of reading on that. It is Between Two Fires, and holy shit, this is a 5-star book for me. It is so beautifully written. It has so much imagery and it's very descriptive, and I could not put it down. It is such a good book. I highly recommend everyone read this book. It's just loved it. I loved the progression of the story. I loved all the details. If you like good historical fiction books, this is definitely one of them. After that, I read kind of another plague-ish book. This was very much more what seemed poetic to me than anything. It is very confusing if you don't focus. So this book, The Salt Grows Heavy, is a book that you really do need to focus on the writing. It has a very intricate style. Like I said, very poetic. It has good imagery as well. I gave it about a 4 out of 5 stars. It is not necessarily like really hard to read, but one of those books where you're just like, wow, this is amazing. And it is very short. However, it is a lot to consume all at once. As for the very first smut book that I read for the year is Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. Holy fuck. So I kept hearing a lot of people that didn't like the book, but a lot of people loved the audiobook. And I'm one, when I'm reading, I'm mainly listening to the audiobook and reading at the same time. I have to have an audio while I'm reading. It really does help kind of immerse myself, especially if there's amazing voice actors going along with the stories. The audiobooks just make it. And holy fuck, please, if you're going to read Lights Out, make sure you listen to the audiobook with it because it is so damn good. I gave this one a 4.75 out of 5 stars. It has a like 9 out of 5 level spice. It is very, very, very intense. It has a lot of trigger warnings, has a lot of content warnings. So just be careful about that if that's not really your cup of tea. Honestly, this was tastefully done, especially with it being about such taboo topics. I think the author did a really good job balancing that because it is such there's so many books that really kind of fantasize and glorify a lot of things that are horrible. And I think this one did a really good job about giving it just the right amount without going way too far over the edge. This book as an audiobook is also read as duet. So you do have the male main character and the female main character voices, which really just intermingle so well. Highly recommend the audiobook, like I said. And some parts at the beginning of the book were very, very cringy. However, it did get better along the way. And if you kind of just like lean into the cringe or you lean into it, it does get a lot better and you kind of don't think about it too much in terms of being like, ooh, icky, 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 that's cringy. But it eventually started to grow on me and it really kind of expanded the story, not solely just on the kinks and the fetishes, but I think this is where this book really stood out, is adding the spice at just the right times. There's so many smut books that are written to where it's immediately and so much all at once, which is fine, but they kind of like lose the story and there's no premise. It's just like all of that, which is also fine. But this one does a very good job of also balancing the story with just the right amount of smut. Highly recommend. I then read, to kind of give myself a palate cleanser, is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This was so freaking cute. I loved that it was written as a journal with her kind of exploring this atmosphere, and it was very, very, very fun style, and loved that it was kind of a fae researcher journal. It just made the story way more fun and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I gave that 4 stars out of 5. I also am excited to read the rest of the series as well because it was very cute and whimsy. I picked up another kind of book talk book, which is My Roommate is a Vampire. I thought it was a really cute story. I loved the concept of it. It is very much a slow burn and a very good palate cleanser if you're reading something like super in-depth, because it's not a long book, but it is still a nice read. I really enjoy the MMC's kind of quirky acts of service, which is his like love language, and I like the dynamic of the two characters. It's like nothing crazy. It has a tad bit of spice, but the story was very nice and believable, which I really enjoyed about that. So yeah, I gave that one about a 3.5 stars out of 5. Next is another series that I cannot wait to finish. I started the Stranger Times series. It is a wild kind of sci-fi story about this newspaper company. I rated it a 4.75 out of 5 stars. It was so good. The characters are very likable too. They have great little background stories. Reggie in this book reminds me a lot of Nathan Lane in The Birdcage. But if you guys have ever seen The Birdcage, it's also literally one of my top favorite movies. As soon as I dove into Reggie's character, that's just what he reminded me of. This is another one I recommend listening to the audiobook as well, because the voice actor does some amazing voices for these characters and really make it funny and just even more what you think the characters are like. They did a really good job giving life to those characters. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the Stranger Times series. I think there's like 3 or 4 books in the series. I could be wrong. So after that fun read, I really wanted to dive into this graphic novel that I have been wanting to read for years now. It is called Black Hole. It is absolutely amazing. Rated at 5 stars out of 5 stars. So fucking good. If you don't like stories that kind of jump around everywhere, this is definitely not the book for you. But it was wow. It was very much just wow the whole time. The art style is absolutely gorgeous. It is so funky and cool and just so creative. So this book is supposed to be what's like pre-1980s HIV and AIDS epidemic, and really dealing with like STDs and the spreading around a high school. It has an insane amount of symbolism in it and a lot of emotions that symbolism carries. A lot of people don't like it because you can kind of get lost in the book, especially going back and forth so many times. But with the pictures and the visuals, it just really was such an amazing book. Even though the story is chaotic, it is very much an in-depth read, and I truly can't believe that I waited this long to even read it. It's honestly a top book of probably my entire collection. Then it was the weekend before the inauguration, and I thought, what better read than to dive into George Orwell's 1984 classic book. If you haven't read it, you must read it. I'm not even going to explain what it is because it's just so fucking good. I think it was my 10th time reading it this year, or not this year, but my 10th time actually reading the book, and it just was so spot on. It was definitely all the emotions I was feeling for that weekend and still feel. 5 out of 5, obviously. Then immediately after finishing that, I picked up Animal Farm, which is an even more mind-blowing, incredible book that everyone needs to read. And honestly, what a weekend to do that. What a weekend to dive into that. This next book was on my TBR, and I really wanted to enjoy this book. However, it flopped for me. It really flopped. I rated this a 3 out of 5. I liked the premise of the book, but it just was bad. It is Off with Her Head. It was extremely repetitive. It's supposed to be about historical women and kind of the patriarchy and things like that. However, I wish it would have included more historical women. It literally just kept repeating the same 5 the entire book, which there's nothing wrong with it. And there were certain parts that I really loved, especially like chapter 4. However, it kind of focused too much on political women figures and focusing too much on the 21st century. And the cover art, it make it seem like you'll be reading about stuff that has happened in the past, thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. It just really, really, really fell flat for me. It had a lot of funny moments, but it really needed more women. It needed more diversity in the book. And I hate that because it felt like it could have been really well done, and it just wasn't. After that, I picked up another book that was highly recommended, which was Wayward. I loved it. I rated it a 4 out of 5. I love the journey of the women. It is very much a slow read, but I honestly couldn't put it down. I thought the writing was really good. It was very descriptive. It gave a lot of imagery. You really get to follow these women's journeys. However, it is not for everyone. It's very realistic. It's very likable, but definitely be warned while reading this book as well. It has a lot of domestic abuse and other things of that nature. At this point, I was feeling like I wanted to read something very funny and kind of lighthearted, and who better than one of my favorite authors of all time, Christopher Moore. I have read every single Christopher Moore book, and I was like, you know what? I'm really going to dive into, I think these were the only 3 that I didn't read yet, and I was like, okay, a vampire series, let's dive into it. So I read the Blood-Sucking Fiends book first. I thought it was really hilarious. I rated it a 4 out of 5. Every time reading a Christopher Moore book is just a hilarious trip. You're going to have a good time reading it. However, the second book, You Suck, I gave it a 3 out of 5. It is definitely written of its time, early 2000s, mid 2000s, where jokes that you can say then, you can't really say now. There are tons of slurs, lines of racism and stereotypes and homophobia. However, the creation of Abby Normal in this book really made it hilarious, and I thought that was the best part of the book, was her, which is even better because the last book in the series, Bite Me, is all about Abby Normal Nosferatu. I gave that one about a 3.75 out of 5 rating. She's this like hilarious gothic teenager that basically the whole book is solely her taking charge. And Moore manages to encapsulate the kind of like goth kids from South Park perfectly in this book, and it just made me laugh even more picturing them in it. Storyline's really good. Overall, a like decent series to read. However, my favorite Christopher Moore book is Fluke and A Dirty Job. So I would definitely recommend those 2 if you want to dive into a really funny author. And diving into another book series that is a very extensive book series. I think there's 7 in this series. The Primal Hunter. I started off with book 1. I read it last year, but I really wanted a refresher because I want to finish reading the series. And it is a very dense book. It is like 700 something pages. It has a lot of statistics in it. It has a lot of world building, and it is definitely a lit RPG, so make sure you take that into account. There is a lot of just numbers and, like I said, stats for the main character that do get a bit repetitive, and I wish there wasn't as much. However, the story is so good, and I love the characters and the atmosphere of it that I cannot wait to read the next 6 in the series. And the last book that I read in this series is a young adult graphic novel, and it was so freaking precious. 5 out of 5 stars. I'm telling you, you need to read this. It's called The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich. It is so cute. It is definitely in my top reads of 2025, if not of all time. I believe everyone needs to read this book. It has a lot of topics on the queer community, trans community, identity, finding your space and the people that love you, and the internal conflict with it, and battling people that may not accept you. It is so good. The artwork is so freaking beautiful. Was just absolutely in love with it. Definitely make sure you check it out. But that wraps up all the books that I read this year. I'm always looking for more recommendations, so make sure you leave your favorite book or a book I should read down in the comments, and I'll be sure to check it out. The rest of the months of the year, I kind of have a theme for each month that I want to read on. So stay tuned for more videos about kind of my book recaps and more of that, because I do really enjoy reading these books. I like to read my books, whether sometimes I have physical copies, audiobooks, ebook copies. I do a lot of checking out from my local library. So make sure you guys, if you don't already have Libby downloaded on your phone, you can use your library card. You can get a ton of different books, and it's free. It's all free right there. And they both have audiobooks, magazines, regular books. They just have tons of different things that you can get on that app. And when you check out Libby, you can also read it with your Kindle, which is like super cool. And also don't forget to follow me on Fable. That is where you can see all the books that I'm reading, all the books that I have read, all my reviews for it. That's also where I'm going to be posting about my book when it comes out. Fable is like a much better Goodreads. If you don't have it, definitely get Fable. There's so many, it's so cute. The layout's amazing. I think it's so well done, and Goodreads is so boring. But definitely get Fable if you don't have it already. Other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful day or morning or afternoon, wherever you are. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye!